So Anomalisa. Now, Anomalisa is an interesting case. We had Charlie Kaufman and Duke Johnson on the show last week, and they talked about the genesis of the project. And as you sort of raised, this began life as a sound play, meaning a play that was done with people sitting on the stage, doing the dialogue, and then sound effects being done so the audience could actually see. So there's a kind of disjunct between what the voices are saying and what you can see on stage. Story is about a dyspeptic middle-aged man in the middle of a kind of pretty sort of regulation midlife crisis. Comes to Cincinnati, goes to stay in a hotel, and whilst he's in the hotel, he has a very disconnected phone call with his wife and his child. And then he seems to spend the rest of the time that he's in the hotel trying to meet up with an old flame, and then falling into a sort of, I think, rather predatory relationship with somebody who's a fan. The whole movie, the whole play was then transformed into a movie by collaborating with Duke Johnson, who shares a co-directing credit with Charlie Kaufman, who's made it in stop motion animation using the replacement face technique, which is this really sort of brilliant visual technique whereby the puppets are on the one hand very lifelike in terms of their bodies, and their facial expressions are very, very convincing, and yet they look like masks. They are basically a series of masks being interchanged, because as Duke Johnson pointed out, this is a series of still frames. Nothing actually moves. Anyway, here's a clip of our hero voiced by David Thewlis arriving on the plane into Cincinnati at the beginning of Anomalisa.
Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to be the first to welcome you to Cincinnati, where the local time is 7:43 p.m. and the temperature is 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Sorry, I grabbed your hand.
It's okay.
It's a reflex. I'm usually sitting next to my wife. But I don't like to fly.
I said it's okay. You can let go now, though.
So that gives you, I think, a sense of the tone of the film. It's not the best of clips, but it kind of tells you what the tone of the film is like. And there's much about it that I like, and some about it that I don't like. What I like about it is I think the animation is quite dazzling and really quite breathtaking in places. I've been struck recently by what an extraordinary period we're going through in terms of animation. You've had Inside Out winning the Oscar for Best Picture. I know that both Kaufman and Johnson said they didn't like Inside Out, and I disagree with them. I think it's a masterpiece. They lost out the Oscar to that film, but I think it's brilliant. You have the Ghibli productions. I mean, last year we had Tale of the Princess Kaguya, which is hand drawn and wonderful. You have stop motion animation from Leica Studios with films like Box Troll and Aardman. You have all these forms of animation coexisting, and then you have Anomalisa, which is stop motion and a film made very specifically for an adult audience. It's not a family film. It's not for children. And I think that firstly, it demonstrates that animation itself really is one of those areas in the whole future of cinema can be seen in there. It's extraordinary what's happening with animation now, and that's wonderful. And I was really struck by the look of Anomalisa. I thought it was, and I would recommend anybody see it for that alone, because I think it really it exists in that strange uncanny valley between something which is necessarily clearly artificial and something which is oddly human. And I found that very, very, very striking. What I'm not so crazy about is actually the story itself. The whole thing plays out that it's only the three voices: David Thewlis, who is the voice of the main guy, Tom Noonan, who is everybody else, with the exception of Jennifer Jason Leigh, who is Lisa, who becomes the Anomalisa character. And the whole story is about this delusion that everyone else in the world, other than you, are pretty much the same person, until Lisa manages to break through that. So it's about isolation. It's about somebody being unable to connect with other people and then forming, albeit momentarily, a connection. And it draws on themes that have, run through Kaufman's work as a screenwriter before, whether it's, being John Malkovich, or to some extent some of the themes of Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, which is to do with the idea of the persistence of memory and the erasure of memory. And all those themes are in this. I have to say, as far as this story is concerned, I found it, it's quite creepy. I think that, you know, we asked Charlie Kaufman about whether or not he felt that the lead character is very, very unsympathetic. 'Cause I think he is. I think he's creepy and predatory and solipsistic and self-obsessed, but not in a way that I found particularly engaging. And Charlie Kaufman said, well, my feeling is that when I'm writing somebody, I just put myself completely in their position. I just see the world through their eyes. And okay, fine, that's arguable. I don't think that worked for me because I found the presence of that character, you know, basically not something that I enjoyed enormously. I also think that there are structural problems with it. I think there's a whole area in which he goes off in the middle of the night drunk to a toy shop, which is a riff which just doesn't work, and then leads to a payoff gag further on down the line, which again just didn't seem to work and seemed like a weird case, because some of the movie deals with adult subject matter in a way which is, you know, mature and open, all the rest of it. It seemed weird. That seemed like a case of something that was actually sort of rather crass and a little bit infantile. So I have reservations about the story, and I have reservations about the characters and the plot, but I have no reservations at all about the visuals and the way in which, when it works, when it comes together, those two things, the voices and the visuals, create something really quite special. I don't think it's a masterpiece. What I do think is that it has flashes of magic in it that make it worthwhile. But I also understand that it can be very alienating. It can be a very alienating experience. And I'm not entirely sure that outside of a core audience, beyond the visuals, it will connect with as many people as perhaps it wants to. But again, that may well be something that was, you know, within the design of the film. I mean, it's interesting. It's a film about an insular, solipsistic, narcissistic character, and the film itself is a little bit like that, but the visuals are breathtaking.